Let's talk a little bit about some of Bernie Sanders' positions. I've talked to you in the past about how, although Bernie Sanders is kind of framed as this far left, sometimes socialist, sometimes communist person by people who know very little about far left and about communism and about socialism, but be that as it may, we've talked about Bernie Sanders actually being the mainstream guy. And Salon has put together a really interesting article which just looks at 5 issues on which Bernie Sanders' supposed far left views are actually the mainstream. One is healthcare for all. Bernie Sanders saying many times the US is the only country on earth that doesn't guarantee healthcare to all its people as a right. Not exactly true, but certainly the only, or well, I guess the exact quote is the only major country. If by that he means the only country at our level of development, then it would be true. In any case, that is a big yes to single-payer healthcare, healthcare for all. And when you look at, for example, the January 2015 poll that was done of Americans, a majority of Americans overall support the government providing some basic level of care to all people, regardless of ability to pay. This one we've talked about. Another one we've talked about is taxing the rich. Bernie Sanders has been very vocal about the massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the top 0.1% of 1%. And he says we do need to have a higher top marginal tax rate. 64% of Americans say they are bothered a lot by the feeling that corporations and rich people aren't paying their fair share of taxes. 67% of Americans recently told Gallup they were dissatisfied with the way income and wealth are distributed. And a majority recently said they would be okay with taxing the richest Americans more in order to equalize the wealth gap that has developed. We've talked about Bernie and tuition-free college. He has proposed the College for All Act. 63% of respondents to a recent survey support a similar proposal from President Obama from earlier this year, including even 47% of Republicans. That was actually a surprisingly popular one, Lewis.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think people see that in other countries, this works. And, you know, at least to some extent, we should have free college.
Campaign finance reform, another issue that Bernie Sanders has been forcefully running against money in politics. 84% of recent poll respondents said money has too great of an influence on political campaigns. 66% agreed that the wealthy have the most influence. 77% want to limit the amount of money individuals can contribute to political campaigns, and 75% support public disclosure of campaign contributors. Bernie is the guy for all of those people. And lastly, same-sex marriage. And I bring this one up not because Bernie is the only guy supporting same-sex marriage, but because Bernie Sanders has been vocally supporting LGBT rights and same-sex marriage at minimum at the sort of national stage, going all the way back to 1996. That is still essentially decades ahead of many Democratic politicians, and of course many Republican politicians still haven't come around on that. So Bernie Sanders ahead of the curve on that one.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders seems to be the guy. Of course, I really like his views on campaign finance reform, something that we think is probably the biggest issue facing the country, because you need to address that before you can solve any of the other problems. So, yeah, we're rooting for Bernie.
And sadly, in spite of Bernie Sanders being the mainstream candidate, too many people don't realize that. But even more sad, too many people still don't even know who Bernie Sanders is. So there is certainly a name awareness program, a problem right now. And we'll see if Bernie Sanders can deal with that in the months to come. Twitter.com/David Pakman Show. Send me your thoughts on this. We'll be back right after a short break.